A man goes to the doctor with a long history of migraine headaches. After the doctor reviews his history and physical, he discovers that the poor guy has tried practically every therapy known to man for his migraines and still has no improvement.
"Listen," says the doctor, "I have migraines too, and the advice I'm going to give you isn't really anything I learned in medical school. But it's advice that I've gotten from my own experience. When I have a migraine, I go home, get in a nice hot bathtub, and soak for a while. Then I have my wife sponge me off with the hottest water I can stand, especially around my forehead. Then I get out of the tub, take her into the bedroom, and make love to her. Almost always, the headache is immediately gone. Now, give it a try and come back and see me in 6 weeks."
6 weeks later, the patient returns with a big grin. "Doc, I took your advice. I did exactly like you said, and it works. I've had migraines for 17 years, and this is the first time anyone has ever helped me."
"Well," says the doctor, "I'm glad I could help."
"By the way, Doc," the patient adds, "you have a really nice house." A honeymoon couple were staying at the Watergate Hotel in Washington. The bride was concerned.
"What if the place is still bugged?"
The groom responded, "Don't worry, honey, I'll look for a bug." He looked behind the drapes, behind the pictures, under the rug. Finally, he said, "Got it!" Under the rug was a disc with 4 screws. He got out his Swiss Army knife, unscrewed the screws, then threw the screws and the disc out the window. The next morning, the hotel manager came upstairs and asked the newlyweds,
"How was your room? How was the service? How was your stay at the Watergate?"
"Why are you asking me all of these questions?" asked the groom. The hotel manager replied,
"Well, the guests staying in the room under you complained that their chandelier fell on them last night."
Observing from a distance, the store manager watches with concern as a salesperson engages in a heated exchange with a disgruntled customer. After a few tense minutes, the customer storms out of the store, leaving behind a notable air of frustration. Approaching the salesperson with a furrowed brow, the manager's disapproval is clearly evident.
"I saw what just happened,"
the manager begins, his tone tinged with disappointment.
"And it seems you've forgotten our motto. The customer is always right."
Apologizing, the salesperson attempts to explain, but the manager cuts them off firmly.
"No excuses. The customer is always right."
With a resigned nod, the salesperson accepts the rebuke, understanding the importance of prioritizing customer satisfaction. Curiosity aroused, the manager presses on.
"What exactly were you two arguing about?"
Reluctantly, the salesperson admits, "Well, you see, sir, he called you an idiot." 3 engineers and 3 accountants are traveling by train to a conference. At the station, the 3 accountants each buy tickets and watch as the 3 engineers buy only a single ticket.
"How are 3 people going to travel on only 1 ticket?"
asks an accountant. "Watch and you'll see," answers an engineer. They all board the train. The accountants take their respective seats, but all 3 engineers cram into a restroom and close the door behind them. Shortly after the train has departed, the conductor comes around collecting tickets. He knocks on the restroom door and says, "Ticket, please." The door opens just a crack, and a single arm emerges with a ticket in hand. The conductor takes it and moves on. The accountants saw this and agreed it was quite a clever idea. So, after the conference, the accountants decided to copy the engineers on the return trip and save some money. When they get to the station, they buy a single ticket for the return trip. To their astonishment, the engineers don't buy a ticket at all.
"How are you going to travel without a ticket?"
asks one perplexed accountant. "Watch and you'll see," answers an engineer. When they board the train, the 3 accountants cram into a restroom, and the 3 engineers cram into another one nearby. The train departs. Shortly afterward, one of the engineers leaves his restroom and walks over to the restroom where the accountants are hiding. He knocks on the door and says,
Ticket, please.
A couple of little old ladies are sitting on a porch and talking to each other about their grandchildren.
I send gifts, greeting cards, and checks to my grandchildren,
Complains one.
and still they barely visit me.
The second old lady says,
Oh, I also send checks to my grandchildren, and they visit me all the time.
You are so fortunate to have more grateful grandchildren than my own.
says the first lady sadly. The second old lady smiles and says,
No, my grandchildren are about as grateful as yours are.
So, what do you do differently? Are your checks bigger than mine?
asks the first lady, surprised.
No,
Chuckles the other old lady.
I just don't sign mine.
A businessman is driving through a small town on his way to an important presentation. He suddenly realizes he needs a haircut and doesn't have much extra time. He remembers there's a little barber shop on the next corner, so he stops, and a short while later he's back on his way. A few weeks later, the man returns to the little barber shop.
Hello again, sir.
Greets the barber.
What can I do for you today?
Oh, I'd like another haircut,
Replies the man.
but I'm awfully particular. Can I make a few requests this time?
Of course.
Replies the barber.
Anything you want. Please, have a seat.
The businessman sits down.
So, what would you like this time?
Asks the barber.
Well, for starters, I want you to cut my right sideburn an inch shorter than my left,
Says the man.
Cut the hair on the nape of my neck at a 5-degree angle instead of straight across.
He continues.
I'd also like my hair parted on the left, but unevenly. Oh, and please cut exactly 2 little divots out of the back of my head. When you use the clippers, I want the 2 sides slightly different lengths. Blend the sides in, but don't blend in the back. Oh, and when you put the hair gel in, comb the front straight forward and the hair on the top of my head to the rear.
The barber is taken aback by all these odd requests.
Sir, I can't do all that.
The barber insists.
Why not?
Asks the businessman.
That's what you did last time.
After digging to a depth of 10 feet last year, just outside of New York City, New York scientists found traces of copper cable dating back 100 years. After intensely studying the cable, they concluded that their ancestors already had a telephone network more than 100 years ago. Not to be outdone, in the weeks that followed, a Los Angeles, California archaeologist dug to a depth of 20 feet somewhere just outside of Burbank. Shortly after, a story appeared in the LA Times that read, California archaeologists report finding a 200-year-old copper cable. They have concluded that their ancestors already had an advanced high-tech communications network 100 years earlier than the New Yorkers. About 1 week later, a local newspaper in Houston, Texas, reported the following. After digging to a depth of 30 feet in his pasture near the community of Sugar Land, Bubba, a self-taught archaeologist, reported that he found absolutely nothing. Bubba has therefore concluded that 300 years ago, Texas had already gone wireless. One Saturday morning, Bob got up early, put on his long johns, and began to dress quietly. He slipped into the garage and hooked his boat up to the truck, then proceeded to back out into a torrential downpour. There was snow mixed with rain, and the wind was blowing 50 miles per hour. He immediately pulled back into the garage, turned on the radio, and discovered that the weather would be bad throughout the day. Disappointed, he went back into the house, quietly undressed, and slipped back into bed. He cuddled up to his wife, now with a different anticipation, and whispered, "The weather is terrible outside." His wife sleepily replied,
I know. Can you believe my stupid husband is out fishing in that
After 37 years of marriage, Jack dumped his wife for his young secretary. His new girlfriend demanded that she should live in Jack's luxurious house. Since Jack's lawyers were of a higher caliber, he received the house in the divorce. He gave his ex-wife Emma 3 days to move out. She spent the first day packing her belongings into boxes, crates, and suitcases. On the second day, she had the movers come and collect her things. On the third day, she sat down for the last time at their beautiful dining room table by candlelight. Then she put on some soft background music and feasted on a pound of shrimp, a jar of caviar, and a bottle of Chardonnay. After she finished, she went into each and every room and deposited a few half-eaten shrimp shells dipped in caviar into the hollow of the curtain rods. She then cleaned up the kitchen and left. When the husband returned with his new girlfriend, all was bliss for the first few days. Then slowly, the house began to smell of rotting shrimp. They tried everything, cleaning, mopping, and airing the place out. Vents were checked for dead rodents, and carpets were steam cleaned. Air fresheners were hung everywhere. Exterminators were brought in to set off gas canisters, during which they had to move out for a few days. In the end, they even paid to replace the expensive wool carpeting. Nothing worked. People stopped coming over to visit. Repairmen refused to work in the house. The maid quit. Finally, they couldn't take the stench any longer and decided to move. A month later, even though they had cut their price in half, they could not find a buyer for their stinky house. Word got out, and eventually even the local realtors refused to return their calls. Finally, they had to borrow a huge sum of money from the bank to purchase a new place. The ex-wife called the man and asked how things were going. He told her the saga of the rotting house. She listened politely and said that she missed her old home terribly. In fact, she would be willing to reduce her divorce settlement in exchange for getting the house back. Assuming his ex-wife had no idea how bad the smell was, he agreed on a price that was about 10% of what the house had been worth. But only if she were to sign the papers that very day. She agreed, and within the hour, his lawyers delivered the paperwork. A week later, the man and his girlfriend stood smiling as they watched the moving company pack everything to take to their new home, including the curtain rods. 15 minutes into a flight from Los Angeles to New York, the captain announces,
Ladies and gentlemen, one of our engines has failed. However, there is nothing to worry about. Our flight will take an hour longer than scheduled, but we still have 3 engines left.
30 minutes later, the captain announces,
One more engine has failed, and the flight will take an additional 2 hours. But don't worry, we can fly just fine on 2 engines.
An hour later, the captain announces,
One more engine has failed, and our arrival will be delayed another 3 hours. But don't worry, we still have 1 engine left.
At this point, a young blonde passenger turns to the man in the next seat and remarks,
If we lose one more engine, we're going to be up here all day.
A man enters a pet store looking for an unusual pet. As he enters the store, the clerk asks,
Can I help you, sir?
Yes, I'm looking for a new pet. Do you have anything unusual? The clerk asks,
How about a polar bear?
The man, taken aback but intrigued, asks, A polar bear? Well, is it tamed? The shop clerk guides the man to the bear's cage and says,
This polar bear is absolutely tame. But whatever you do, don't touch his nose.
The man decides to buy the polar bear and takes it home. The man is very happy with his new pet. However, one day, remembering what the pet store clerk had told him, the man thinks to himself, I just have to find out what happens if I touch his nose. So he reaches out and touches the polar bear's nose. Suddenly, the polar bear leaps towards the man and chases him throughout the house. Finally, the man runs out of breath and the polar bear catches up to him. The man looks up in fear as the polar bear raises his mighty paw. Terrified by what will happen next, he closes his eyes. Unexpectedly, the bear merely taps the man on the head and says,
You're it.